All right, welcome to the Get Hoptimized podcast. I am Chris, your host. And look, nobody loves dealing with the TTB. But what really sucks is when mistakes are made that cause production delays. It's also pretty darn lame to feel blindsided by new regulations that throw even more wrenches into your operation. If only there were someone who could help guide you through all this red tape. Lucky for you, I have just the person here on the podcast with me today. Wendy Raymond, the founder of Taps and Snaps, is a TTB compliance consultant. Wendy brings over a decade of experience in operations, sales forecasting, demand planning, and marketing strategy with a deep focus on the unique challenges faced by producers in regulated industries like alcohol. She's also super fun. I've spent time with Wendy at several conferences, and it's always a good time to see you. Welcome to the show, Wendy. What is up?
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Chris.
Yeah, of course, of course, of course. So where are you coming from? I think you're up in Utah, right?
Yeah, I currently live in Utah. I'm almost to the Idaho border, but have spent a lot of time in the Midwest and on the East Coast. So this is the
Okay.
farthest out west we have lived.
All right. Well, as a fellow Western United Stateser, you are welcome here. Utah is cool. I love going out there. My wife and I just went out last year for our anniversary. We did Kanab, which is kind of southern side of Utah, but it's an awesome spot. Great beer up there
Mhm.
and over there, which is rad. So, well, before we get too far into this, you and I know each other, but why don't you give the background on who you are and a little bit about yourself for us to get started?
Sure. I've been working somehow in the industry about the past 10 years, really using my past work experience and helping folks get things situated and help them move forward. I think we have a lot of folks that, they're starting anew and it's all new and it's all exciting. And it's like, wait a minute, let's put some structure to this to help you move forward. Um, so yeah, I worked to my certified Cicerone, got that done. I feel like I'm like that's done. Um, do a lot of stuff with Pink Boots Society and the Brewers Association. I'm currently sitting on their subcommittee to pick their speakers for next year's CBC, which is really exciting to see what people want to present and also exciting to hear what people have said in the past that they want to see and hear and learn from. So it's exciting. It's fun.
Nice, nice. You're all over the place. You're doing pink boots. You're doing this stuff. You said you're part of the Brewers Association. So for CBC, like legit on the inside of
Yeah,
these things. And Cicerone is in there. Well, what was that like? What does it take to be a Cicerone? What do you have to do that?
it's a lot. It's a lot of studying, a lot because you have the academic side of things, a 3 hour written test. Then you have the tasting portion, which I drink a lot of beer, a lot of beers, just to learn style. And when you live in Utah, little fact, we don't get a lot of foreign English beers, German beers here. And
Mm.
so I spent a lot of time driving to Idaho to get the beers that I needed to dial in on style and stuff. But it's a process. It really is.
Wow.
But I'm
Why
glad
did
it's. I mean, I'm glad I stuck with it and was like, okay, I'm just going to take this test and be done with this. So
what made you want to do that? I mean, aside from maybe, maybe both here is probably some personal goals, right? Like that'd be really cool. But was there like a motivation to do this for what you do professionally?
Uh, kind of. I felt like if I had a better understanding of more of the brew side of things, the ingredients, that it would just help give me a little more that I can bring to folks in the industry.
Got it. I've thought about that. I used to be, I say used to now, because I haven't homebrewed in like forever because I just don't have time. All this stuff is literally sitting on my shelves over here in my office. And I was thinking, man, it'd be cool to do like the judging thing and like get the judge certification and that kind of stuff. That'd be a fun way for me to stay involved and practiced. So you're giving me some motivation on that. Another question I have for you, kind of warm up stuff here is like, what does a regulatory consultant do?
We are not invited to most parties. I'll leave it at that.
You and
No.
the accountants, these folks.
It's true. Being a compliant consultant, I just help take their world and the regulatory world and help them understand without having them sit for a long period of time and trying to figure these things out for themselves. It's coming forward and saying, okay, let me help you with this because I get this. This is the information you need. And now let's move it forward. And just also to help look at processes and say, okay, you need to keep this in mind. And also, we'll talk about like what's coming down the pipeline, what changes are up there, and going, okay, so you got to think about these things as you move forward.
Definitely. You know, the way I kind of think about it is like, I'm a big efficiency guy with whatever we do with marketing agency. I'm like, we can do it. We can help you move faster, quicker, more efficient, and that
Mm-hmm.
saves you time, saves you money. And I look at what you do a little bit as creating efficiencies when it comes to these regulatory things, because if you put something in proper, then you're just burning time and in some cases financial resources to make mistakes, and you don't want that as an organization, and that's where a consultant can plug in and fit. In thinking about that, what I mean, there's got to be some stuff you've noticed over the years that's like, yeah, this is stuff that always happens, like common errors that breweries or distilleries run into. Maybe let's start there with some of our industry related questions. What are like the common errors that you see?
Well, on the very top of it is having multiple graphic designers.
Mm.
A lot of the folks I work with are just coming out. They're just starting a can. They're just starting their production, and money's tight. And so they have friends that work for the brewery or are their regulars, and they're like, "Oh, hey, I can do that. I know how to do that." But then they start to pick different people, and their brand gets skewed. Doing what you all do, you understand that. Like, you have to have your shelf legit rather than having four different styles sitting out there that everyone's like, oh, that's them too. Oh, that's them. So what happens is you start using all these people and then it's, oh, okay. So sorry, the government warning's not correct on this one. Some folks I say, send an old label over to them and just tell them, these things need to stay in this order. That's kind of a big thing is just getting the basics on your label. Um, yeah, but
You would think this is like, pretty standard operating procedure. And maybe I'm jaded because we deal with this stuff frequently,
yeah.
but like you're saying that there's, it's like the government labels are wrong or outdated, or like, simple information, like you got to put your manufactured in state, whatever stuff on there,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Well, and I think also because you're coming right out of the gate and you're like, oh, this is cool. I can do this. I can do that. I had a graphic designer was trying to be funny and decided to put the whole government warning in like big bold, and I'm like, you can't do that. Well, I thought that'd be funny. I'm like, they don't think that's funny, and like we're wasting time going back and forth here. Some of the other big things, not understanding what your state regulation is. I think,
Mm.
I sit out, I'm on all these different chats and that you can throw questions out there. And I always sit back and sometimes I'm like, do I make a comment? No, I'm going to sit here and watch this occur. And either it's government bashing, fine, whatever. And then it's, well, this is what we do. It's like, well, what state are you in? Oh, I'm in Florida. Well, what state are you in? I'm in Alabama or Mississippi. It's like, that's a whole different ballgame. And, so it's not listening to your friend Joe that works in a different state, or even your buddy down the street that may own a brewery as well, because not everybody wants to be as tight with their compliance.
Mm. Yep, that is absolutely a factor. And honestly, we've fallen into that trap and being like, well, they do it that way in Florida. You know, can we do it that way in Wisconsin? Maybe. I don't know. We got to look at what Wisconsin says, for us to be able to do, and then make sure you follow those state level regulations. So that's a
Mm-hmm.
common one, is the state level stuff. And I don't know if people know this or not, but there's 50 states. There's probably 50 different state level changes or differences that are out there. So that's a
Mhm.
good one to call out for sure. Aside from like errors, like avoiding simple things that are maybe just like plain text out there in some list on the TTB site. Is there anything else you see that happens with like filings and reportings that people are missing and mistakes there?
Actually, this isn't necessarily on reporting and well, it has to do with filing. A lot of folks are starting to use terpenes extracts in their
Mm.
brews, and those require formulas. And so, you go to file and they're like, no, you need a formula. Okay, so you go to do your formula, but you don't have all your spec sheets and everything. Well, then that also adds more time. And so we're starting to see that there's a lot more that's starting to be done that does require the formula. And it's understanding that when you're creating your recipes, you're looking at your brew schedule, it's really important to understand that you have all the paperwork that you need to file your formula. And the
Yeah,
other
because the
thing,
extracts are getting more popular, and
exactly,
you're saying that you
especially
got
the
to
fresh
have the.
extracts, yeah, and we're definitely going to see a lot more of that. um, and as far as reporting or filing goes, you have someone new that comes on staff and you want them to file their colas for you and so forth and so on. Well, they need an account set up through your TTB permits online. That takes time. It's not like you say, yes, this person can do this, and tomorrow you're approved. No, it can take 2 weeks plus sometimes to
Oh,
get someone to have a COLA account or a formula account. So whenever someone's like, oh, I'm going to start doing this, it's like, okay, here's things you need to do ahead of time so you don't try to, like, I don't know, jump off your dock without something there.
so don't wait to set up that account until the
Exactly.
day before you're supposed to submit stuff, because
Yes,
you are going to be late, or you're going to have to wake somebody up to get them to log in and file it. That's
exactly.
actually a really good call out, because from my perspective, like we're inside of accounts, in not TTB accounts all the time, but like Facebook or email marketing accounts and whatever, and you spin these things up like in seconds, and I would not even think that it would take it would take time to have the account approved and whatnot with the TTB. So that is an excellent call out, that get the accounts in sooner because you need time.
You
Uh,
do.
yeah,
You
government moves
do.
slow, I think I've heard.
Well, and I honestly, if you think about how many people they're dealing with, it's a lot of people. And I don't expect stuff to be done the next day. I mean, if we really think about it, to file a COLA or a formula is free. Yes, I know we pay excise tax and everything else, but it's not an additional cost like most states are an additional cost for you to file with them. So it does take time, and government things, legal things take time. That's the other thing that I've seen over the past few years is people making a change in ownership, and they're just like, oh, it's just, one managing partner leaving. Well, you have to recreate the wheel. You have to file with your, account online with the documents supporting this, because if they find out that you backtrack this, they can actually shut you down, and the state can shut you down. And then you have to
Ooh,
wait. Yes, yes. Can't
dang.
say
So
who, but like was closed for 2, 3 weeks because they didn't cross their T's and dot their I's in the right order in the right time.
wow. So
So
if you are buying a brewery or selling it or bringing on partners, this applies here.
yes,
Got
yes,
it. Interesting. Yeah, because when you do this with it, like it's kind of confusing, because if you do this for like your LLC with, your state or federal level filings,
hmm,
it's like a once a year thing. You just
exactly.
update it at some point. But with the TTB, not the case. Got to submit this right away.
Hmm.
Dang, so many things in here. Well, I think also, aside from like errors and things to avoid, and I'm sure we'll uncover more of these things as we go along, this stuff is a moving target a little bit. Regulations are evolving, things are constantly changing. You know better than most here what we should look out for. What are the things we should be watching out for from the TTB or this kind of regulatory stuff?
As far as down the road looking for,
Yeah, what's coming down the pipe? Are there new things that aside from, the stuff we're just getting used to dealing with or having errors on, what else do we have to deal with coming?
well, funny you should ask. So the TTB put out some proposals 2 years ago, and they're probably the two things that are fresh in people's minds. Was listing all your ingredients and having a nutritional fact or alcohol serving facts panel, and then also stuff in regards to allergens. So, as I said, it was released 2 years ago, and they were like, okay, we're going to close this down from commenting. And they came back out. They're like, psych, we're just kidding. We're going to open it up for more commenting. So they went for a year. Actually, today is the deadline to file your comments. The Brewers Association is great with combining what their folks have told them, and they put together a huge report. The report that they filed last year is somewhere on their website. It's just a good perspective of how that association views things for the industry and what they're telling TTB. So I say this the way I'm saying it because this request for proposals have been going on since 2003. And it's all these consumer groups get together and they want to see this. And, the brewing industry wants to see this. And so it's just been this back and forth, and it's trying to do the struggle of cost. Is this cost effective? Cost effective, one, for the consumer and also for the producer, big time. A lot of folks don't like regulation. They don't like compliance. And here's the thing. I tell everybody, the government protects the consumer, but the government also protects you. And, that's where these proposals keep coming back and forth. And things over time have come out of the proposals. Like, if you're going to cross state lines, you have to put your ABV and percentage on the label. Different information like that. And so right now, when they threw back the proposals out this past year, they changed up some things. They got rid of that you don't have to list out all your ingredients. Thank goodness, because that would be a nightmare.
Nice.
Especially for distillers, which that would be, we're not even going to discuss that. That's nightmares for them. It's looking like somewhere on their label, they've got to do a serving fact, alcohol facts box or panel. And it's going to have your calories per serving, your fats, carbs, and proteins per serving, and also your ounces of pure alcohol per serving. So that's kind of a new addition rather than just saying it's 5% ABV,
And
right?
is this going to be like every state, or will this be like state by state will choose if they adopt this?
This would be a federal.
Mm.
So
Federal is the right word for that. Yes, I couldn't think of it.
All right, I get it. And so the biggest concern here is for the smaller folks. Okay, well, how am I going to get my fat, carbs, and proteins? Like, how am I going to calculate that? And there's quite a handful of calculators out there that you could input your ingredients and it would spit out the information. But as of right now, the TTB hasn't said, okay, well, if this goes into effect, this is how it will be calculated. Part of their coming out again, it was they removed insisting that everything has to be laboratory sampled, because that would be exuberant cost for producers.
Yeah, that's the feedback I've gotten, is that it's like, man, we're gonna have to send this out to get sampled by a lab, and expensive. And there's so many new beers that a brewery's cranking out all the time.
Right.
Are you kidding me? We do this every 2 weeks, or every week, or multiple times a week.
Or you just take a basic beer and you tweak it just a little bit. So
Mm-hmm.
they're looking on kind of removing that obstacle. Obviously, they'll still request lab samples for various things, especially on a side of things that need formulas. But part of that as well is they're looking to increase the tolerance by plus or minus 1% ABV, which would help the smaller folks calculate their ABV rather than buying expensive equipment. And some of these folks, they don't have that kind of money. It just isn't.
Mhm.
But if they became a brewer, they can do math. Like they understand the chemistry. Like they can do that. So that is going to be a benefit if these things go down the line. You mentioned the QR code.
Yes, that's something I wanted to ask about. I've heard, I've had actually someone on the podcast that was really like hoping that this would be the case. And I'm curious your thoughts. QR code that would like link to these nutrition facts. Your thoughts on that actually happening?
Uh, as of right now, it is a no go. There is writing
Womp
out
womp.
there in the TTB proposal that they're just like, look, it's not going to happen,
Mm,
which is a shame because the EU, the wine industry over there relies heavily on it. Their federal here, their thing is that they don't feel like enough people have phones to scan
mm.
this information.
So like widespread ability to access the internet via
Exactly.
phone.
Yeah. So it's just like, okay. It's just kind of a bummer. It's just like, well, that would save space on a can with all this info. Um, it looks like they may allow it to be a panel rather like a long panel and a short, like our
Okay.
normal nutrition facts that we're used to help with retail space on your label. So it'll be interesting to see what they finally come down to because it's a lot of work.
Well, yeah, it changes, operation on design.
Mhm.
Now you got to make space for this extra stuff. And we all love these beautiful, amazing label designs that are out there, us included. And it's like, dang, I got to take up some real estate to put, some big white box on there. And, all the designers are cringing.
Right. I don't blame them. The
Yeah.
good thing is, in the proposal, they were looking to allow this to be weaned in over 5 years, which would be great. Because people are like, what do you
Okay.
do with my labels? I'm like, okay, if you're not out of your labels by then, you probably bought too much to begin with. I
Yeah,
mean,
your beer has been
right.
sitting on the shelf way too long, anyways. But I mean, that's
Exactly.
a pretty good grace period that 5 years
Exactly.
is out there. So you got
Yeah.
time to
Yes.
make the adjustment, is what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, and they also speak to that they're not going to require new colas. I, that's in the proposal. I kind of feel like if you're going to go out and you are requiring these facts to be on your labels, but I'm not TTB and I can't speak for them. But it just seems a little odd that you would go out to enforce this and be like, we don't need to see it. So
Yeah, it seems like an error. Like, what? How do you know if I did it or not?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I could see all the renegade brewers out there being like, well, they don't require a new one, so who cares?
exactly.
Um, Wow. Okay. That is some really insightful stuff. So watch out for the nutrition facts stuff coming down the pipe. Very, very good stuff. Another thing that I think is relatively new is some of this like online recording and reporting stuff. A little bit easier, a little more efficient, if I'm remembering correctly from previous conversations. Can you tell us about that?
They used to have the fill in PDF form and, big room for error. They went out, they did a beta testing, and now you can sign up for their beta testing. There's a couple requirements, but they're not that hard to fit into the parameters. But it's great. You can go online, you can go into your account. It has like self calculations for you. It has tables to like help you understand what you need to put in that area. So and it also keeps it all in nice one place. I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm like, what did I do with that file? I know it's like, oh, I do this every month, but I can't find this one. So it's kind of nice to have that location with all that electronic documents that eventually will feed into quarterlies and yearlies and that sort of thing. So it's definitely worth looking into. And I can put a link on my website for that information. But I mean, just save some time. They're just trying to help one to have reports correct. I think that's the thing. And it's like, all
Yes.
right, let me help you do this. So it's a great thing to get into.
Yeah, it probably makes things more accurate and less feedback or back and forth rather, and saying,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, this doesn't look right," or God forbid someone's printing and writing this thing out. And it's like, is that a six or an L or what on this thing?
Exactly.
You're avoiding that mistake by just having the thing being a form online, essentially, with this. That has to be good for breweries. So nutrition facts, ugh, but online recording and reporting, okay, we like that.
Exactly.
Easier.
Yes.
Uh, okay. Any other comments on reporting online thing? I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off if I did.
no, you're fine. No, no, nothing much to say about that. I really, when it comes to that stuff, I'm like, this is where you go. If you need help, I can hook you up with someone, but I don't want to touch it. I just don't.
Nice. Nice. Good. And that's the thing is take the advice and know where to go. I think that's so many businesses that me myself included. So speaking from my own perspective, sometimes it's like I don't know where to go to do this damn thing. Where do I go to do the thing? And if you know where that stuff is, keep a record of where it's supposed to go, keep a record of your logins and your access to these things. You start to increase some efficiency here to come back to that efficiency metaphor or whatever on that. So I think you'd agree with that is, have some organization and know where to go. It helps, right?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Something you brought up earlier or alluded to was COLAs and the certificate of label approval for the full acronym here. What's up with those? Do you have any advice on how to avoid mistakes in getting these approvals?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, understand what your state requires, especially if your beer is just going to stay in the state, then you don't have to deal. You may not have to deal with a cola. For instance, North Carolina, you don't have to do a cola. You can just do a state submission. That's a new word. Submittal, and not jump through those hoops. But if you cross state lines, you have to get the cola, and then whatever state you're moving into, get their approval as well. But Utah, we have to have both. Even if you're selling the beer in the state, you have to still have your cola, and then get state approval. So understanding that, and also understanding filing fees. If you are looking to start distributing across state lines, having that understanding of, okay, I have to pay X amount of dollars to the graphic designer. I have to pay X amount of dollars to whomever files this information, whether it be an employee of yours and such. And then whatever filing fees as well. Graphic design changes, can get pricey. So those are kind of the biggest starts of trying to avoid errors. Um,
I think that's good advice. I love that you're talking graphic design stuff because I think it's overlooked. It's like, oh
mm,
yeah, we'll get the thing designed, and then it's like, well, now I need to change, and it's like I'm asking this person to put in more time, reopen the files, do these things. Maybe there's things. What you don't realize with the design is that okay, if we've got to add more space to one section, that
it
may
moves
throw off
everything.
something all everywhere else, and we've got to spend another 30 minutes an hour messing around with a bunch of elements. It does take time, and
Mhm.
you know got to be prepared for that. But if you had the right inputs, that's like my main frustration point with our designers is like, why didn't we know this initially? It's like, well, we just didn't know. The client changed their mind. We got to update it. Had we just had the right inputs to start, we're talking about a lot of time and frustration savings
Mhm.
with your designers. And who knows, uh, if you ever had somebody walk away from you and they're like, oh yeah, they stopped responding to my emails about my design requests. It's like, well, probably because we got a lot of these change requests. It's annoying, right?
Well, and there is frustration with that with folks that submit colas, because if you have an agent come back and say you need to make this change, you go back, you make the change, you resubmit. Well, nowadays you can get a different agent, and that agent may look at that label differently, and now is like, oh well, this. And I feel horrible for some of my clients, especially my sake clients, because that is a whole different ball of wax, and their labels are based on wine regulation, but they're brewed, so it's on the beer side of things. It's a hot mess, but continuous change after change after change,
Yeah.
on how those different people view it. But with that being said, there's a couple things that I'll tell my folks: have your designer do this way and this way. We'll
Mm-hmm.
submit how we really really want it to be, And then if it comes back, boom, it's already done. The person's already in that file, as you said. And, obviously these are small, simple changes. These aren't like, reinventing the wheel. But I've lately I've been trying to do a lot more of that because I'm just like, I don't know if this is going to pass, but it'd be great if it would. So let's just see.
That's great advice from you and being like, hey, just knock out both. That way I have a
Mhm.
backup just in case. And it's simple things. Like I remember we were doing labels last year for a brewery and they wanted to call it like a New Zealand IPA or a New England IPA. And like the regulations came back and said it has to be like New England style or German style or New Zealand style. And these phrases had to be included and there was just time wasted. And like eventually we figured out it's like, okay, anytime we're doing anything that mentions a country, we have make sure we say style. But those kind of things can cause frustration and just delay stuff. Um,
Mhm.
something I'm personally curious about
Mhm.
is the differences between like these types of regulations and approvals between brewery, distillery. You mentioned sake in there, cidery. These are all kind of different brews, different environments. Are these like regulatory things radically different between each of these categories?
You know, Sake, as I said, because they fall into the wine world. Well, they feel like sake should be in just two categories and that's it. But sake is becoming more popular. There's a lot more folks in the States that are trying to brew sake. And so now we're adding more flavors. Now we have the formula that's got to come into play. And how that formula's idiosyncrasies are described on the label, made with natural flavor, made with fresh fruit or whatever. So we end up in this spiral there. Distilleries, it's so formula heavy. It is
Hmm.
just to the grindstone, nonstop. The good thing about the spirits world is their descriptions of how that beverage, that spirit, that liquid falls into is very specific. Like it can only be, aged X period of time on this type of oak and so forth and so on. So it's not like us where we're like Belgian double. No, Belgian style double. Okay, but it's a pumpkin porter. Okay, pumpkin porter brewed pumpkin. So there's all these more variances that can go into on the beer side.
Do you
Like you
think
can't
beer is
call it a
harder
Belgian.
than
Yeah.
the spirits? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. And you're right. I didn't even think about that. That, in order to be in order to be bourbon or scotch or, certain kinds of whiskeys, it's literally in the definition of the product that this is how 80% this, 20% this,
Hmm.
period, in order to be part of the category, which I guess makes it easier, you know?
I think so. I mean, the one thing that doesn't get easier across the categories is what you can and cannot say. No joke. All the categories that I've worked with, if you can do it with your body, you cannot put it on the label. And I know that sounds silly, but like you can't say it'll give you a high five. You can't say it's going to be light. Well, it's not. I'm not saying the beer's light. It's like no, you can't do that. So I always say if you can do it with your body, you can't have it on your label. I don't know why it just stuck, and it makes sense. Like if people's reading their verbiage, I'm like,
Interesting. So you can't play off these kind of like
no,
metaphor, things.
nope. Knock your socks off? Nope. Can't put it on there.
Really.
Which I
And
was
is
really hoping that one would get through, but it didn't.
Wow, that really kills the creativity on that. I guess you could put it on your
Mhm.
menu or something, but not on the label. Got to keep
Yeah.
it pretty straightforward for
Yeah.
folks. Um, and you're right, we run into some of those things with some of our labels too. So really fascinating. I mean, there's all these little nooks and crannies of things that are out there, and I'm glad I asked you about uh, the differences here between spirits and cider is more wine. I imagine these kind of fall into that category, or because these are all
No.
canned up stuff. They look a lot like beer on the shelves,
Yeah.
but still wine kind of look in terms of regulatory.
Exactly. Exactly. And yeah, they kind of all look on the same on the shelf, and I think that's where we get into the whole like descriptions and what it really should be called and not called, and you can't be misleading in this way and that. And it's interesting as we talk about categories, TTB is not over the THC beverages, but it may fall that way just because these beverages are falling into the hands of ABCs in the States. And so, well, that goes hand in hand as well with the TTB. And because the majority of folks that are making these products are brewers. It's if you can do it in your state and you're good at what you do, it is a beverage that you really should look into. It's a cash cow for you. Takes a day to make, and yes, it's also there, understanding all the regulations, which right now are by the states. But it's something to look into for sure. And I
You have
feel
any
like
insight on where that goes? So if it's not the TTB, and you make a THC beer brew of some sort, where does that even go to get approved? Like, do you know anything about where that gets submitted?
you would work with your state. Because right now, all that heavy regulation about what you can and cannot say, what you can and cannot put on your shelf, because the milligrams are different by state. Some are much more strict, and others, some places you can only sell it through a distributor. So we have that kind of coming into play too, which we run into on the beer side like crazy, right? So yeah, so right now it's at the state, but it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next couple of years of where it's really going to fall.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see because, like you said, a lot of brewers are making it, and with good reason because it's a high demand for this product,
Mhm.
and your production facility is probably really close or nearby or part of this whole situation, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it go there. Why not?
Right.
I got the people for it, but maybe it's kind of the federal stuff here because the federal gray zone with with THC is there, where the states are a little bit different stories. So as this evolves, stay tuned
Yes.
to Wendy. She'll probably figure it out for us.
I always say that. I'll figure it out. I don't know. I'll figure it out
Yeah, were you the one in school where people were like, asking you for the answers, off stuff? It's like, hey, Wendy, give me the answers. Can I cheat off your homework?
sometimes, but no.
You were a good kid.
But I mean,
Uh,
that's how I got into this. I had a friend, she was ready to start canning, and she's like, I got to do a cola. I have no idea, and I don't want to figure it out. I'm like, I'll figure it out. And then the more I started talking to people, they're like, I spent 4 hours on the TTB website. I could not figure this out. And I'm like, that's what I do. That's why
nice.
you come to me. So, yeah. And now in the TTB's defense, if you need to find something, if you go to their site and you have the time and the patience, it's there. The answers are there. And they're also great. Pick up the phone and call them. I'm telling you, I've had stuff that I'm
I've
like,
heard
I
that before.
don't, right? Like they're there to help you. And the nicer you are to them, the better they help you and take care of you. So I was so scared of them for a while when I started doing this. I'm like, no, hey, so and so, um, it's the whole honey factor and
Honey
having
catches the
people.
bees, folks. Even
Exactly.
at the TTB, catches the TTB.
Oh, look at you.
There you go. You're free to steal that. We made up something there. I think you're right. I think it's a human factor with these things. If you're nice to folks, they're just trying to get through their day and their job. And if you can help make their job a little easier by
Mhm.
asking the right questions, then you're probably on their good side. And maybe make a joke, talk to them, have fun on the phone, and
Be
brighten up
gentle.
their
Be
day.
gentle. Yes.
Yeah. Right on. So let's go into summary mode here before we kind of wrap things up
All
and
right.
talk about a couple more things. We've talked about a lot of advice, things to avoid, things coming down the pipe. Out of everything we talked about today, what do you think is like the key piece of advice or the key thing to walk away with from if you listen to this whole episode? What's like the key stuff in your mind?
Have a plan. Understand what you can and cannot do. And my biggest advice, and I don't think I've said it yet, do not brew until you have your stuff approved. I have had folks that have brewed beers. Now we go to submit colas, and now we're stuck in the cola world, or we're stuck in formula world. Yeah, yeah.
And you're sitting
Uh,
on products that can't be served.
that and it fills your cooler, waiting for a label. So now you have an extra step put into place. Um, yeah, my top one was 40 days from submission to approval. 40 days. And that's money. That is money and space and time. Yeah.
Yeah, and freshness to your product. You don't want that to be
Hmm.
sitting there for too long. So
Exactly.
important factor is to hold off on the excitement. I know you're excited to get it going, but get the approval first,
Yes. Yes.
then work towards that. I imagine that's a very particular or a especially important for new brewers, people who are
Yes.
just starting out, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Excellent. So okay, great takeaways on that. So if you're like me and you're listening to all this stuff and I'm like, man, I do not want to do this myself. I don't own a brewery, but I put myself in that position. Like, this sounds like a whole bunch of work I don't want to do. I would look to someone like you, Wendy. Tell us about that. So Taps and Snaps is your consulting agency. What do you do for folks? How does it work to work with you, and fill us in?
So we basically work on a contract. I have basic terms, you get this back to me by this time. I get this back to you by this time. And we do a setup fee. And then that way that gets me to get you, get me to be a POA and all the other little steps that need to go into place for things to work smoothly. And then different items that I do, I price them out. So a cola would be X, a formula would be X, state, depending on what needs to be done, will be X. Here in Utah, we have like another code after the fact that you have state approval that you have to get if you want to sell that high point at your location. So there's just all those different factors. And currently also the compliance vendor for the IBA, Independent Brewers Alliance. So I give special pricing for that as well. So it's just trying to put myself in different corners where people can find me and utilize me. I made a lot of connections with beer lawyers or liquor lawyers across the country. That helps because honestly, and lawyers will tell you this, or the good ones should tell you this, that don't pay them hundreds of dollars to do a cola. That's ridiculous. Either you bring it in house or you go to someone like me that is a fraction of the cost. And like I said, a good lawyer will tell you that. That's a really big thing. So yeah,
Yeah,
so
just trying
just
to.
try to kind of be out there and I loved at CBC meeting some new people and they're like, what do you do again? Oh, and then some people are like, I had a cola like stuck. And I'm like, that's where I come in. Even if it's a onesie, because there are things that people are like, I don't have the time to do the back and forth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would
So,
imagine, especially during transitionary periods, that's important. For
mhm,
new, that's important. And as you scale, a book I really like is called it's literally on my desk. It's called Buy Back Your Time. And
mm,
I think a lot of entrepreneurs and small business owners, they don't value their time enough in their business, and you have to be focused on what you are very good at and what you bring to the table for the business. And chances are you got in this business to sell beer, to run the front of house, and or to
mhm,
make beer. And getting caught up in this world of regulatory submissions, and just like you would hire an accountant, just like you would hire a marketing professional, it buys you back time to focus on what makes you happy with the business and what makes you money. And that is where someone like you comes into play. Where is the best way to contact you? You got a website, you got email, LinkedIn. What's your preferred method of communication?
I'm, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, somewhat. My website is Taps and Snaps, all spelled out. It's Taps with an S and Snaps with an S. I have plenty of buttons on my website for us to set up an appointment to talk. I'm happy to like sit down with you for like 30, 40 minutes. Let's chat. Let's see where you're at, what you're looking for. Is it something where I can give you a PDF that'll be on my website free? Here you go. And if you just need the basics, go for it. Now, it's usually above and beyond the basics where I jump in and say, okay, let me take care of this and this and this. So, yeah, so that's where I be at Instagram too, Taps and Snaps. So I have plenty of links to everything else out there as well.
Excellent. If you are listening to this or watching it, we will put the links to these things, website, Instagram, all that stuff for Wendy in the show notes or in the description on the videos and in our blog post on our website. Be sure to go check that out and connect with Wendy. She is an asset. Clearly, she gave us so much great information today. There's more on her website and in her brain. So reach out to her if you need help. Wendy, thank you so much for your time. This was educational for me. I know it was educational for our listeners, and you're awesome. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. I greatly appreciate it.
Cool. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks.